Welcome, Martin Hellberg from Sharkmob. Martin, could you very quickly introduce yourself to our audience who hasn't had a chance to meet you before?
My name is Martin. Like you said, I'm one of the co-founders of Sharkmob. One of my responsibilities here is that of IP director, meaning that I work closely with making sure we follow IP guidelines and take care of story, character, lore, stuff like that. So I work quite closely with the World of Darkness brand team. Prior to Sharkmob, I was for about 15 years in the industry doing lots of different stuff, actually. Last decade or so spent in production, working on games like World in Conflict and Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and later The Division.
That's great. And can I also ask you about your personal World of Darkness story? Because I've heard that you are a pretty long-time World of Darkness fan.
Right. Yeah. I'm born in 1976, so I've been around a while, and I first started playing RPGs because of my brother, who introduced me to a Swedish game called Mutant, and from there it went to Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer and all kinds of stuff. And back in 90, I'd say 94, 95 thereabouts, I started playing Vampire the Masquerade with a bunch of friends in high school. And so since then, I've dabbled a bit in everything. Bloodlines, of course, the video game, and been to a bunch of LARPs, and yeah, I had a blast with World of Darkness games, actually.
Oh, about the LARPs. I'm personally actually someone who, although I've been a very big Vampire the Masquerade fan for a long time, I didn't actually have experience in LARPing. So whenever someone comes to the show and tells us that you've been LARPing, I really want to hear some stories. Do you have any LARP story?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this. And actually, one of my favorite stories, sadly, is not related to Vampire the Masquerade. It was a different LARP. But it was a hard lesson in why knights and warriors never sleep in metal armor.
Oh, no.
It was a winter LARP, November in Sweden, pretty cold. And me and a bunch of other guys had put up a camp in the middle of the forest. And I was totally knackered after a day of running around role-playing. And I came to camp, went to bed, didn't think about removing my armor. So I fell asleep in metal armor. And someone let the fire die. So when I woke up, I had no feeling in my legs for about half an hour. I was completely numb. That's a hard lesson. So yeah, there's that.
I'm just imagining right now that I've never thought about how knights were sleeping back in the day. So thank you so much for this very valuable lesson. I will make sure never to fall asleep in my armor.
Yeah, that's a tip. Don't do it.
And of course, we're going to actually start with this question this time and not end with it. I very often end the interviews with this question, but going back to Vampire the Masquerade, favorite clan?
Right. In my life, I've been a bit of a jack of all trades, dabbling in lots of stuff. And I have two favorite clans, and they're actually not even remotely similar. But I've mostly played as Gangrel or Ventru. So I have two sides conflicting. So I kind of embrace them both.
That's good.
For different reasons.
And speaking of Vampire the Masquerade, Battle Royale, set in the world of Vampire the Masquerade, was a big surprise for a lot of the people in the family. How did this project come about?
Right. So me and four other guys started this studio about 3 years ago. And one of our key drivers or motivators to do this was that we wanted to work with projects and games that we thought were fun and that really engaged with us. And at a certain point, we came in contact with the World of Darkness brand team and had a discussion with them about what we thought about the game and what we thought we could offer, coming from a quite action-oriented multiplayer background. We saw an opening for a marriage between what we consider to be one of the coolest game licenses out there and a type of genre that Vampire the Masquerade had never really explored, an experience that was completely new to this brand, but also something that we saw as a potentially big market. And when we started working on that, that was, in the dawn of the Battle Royale genre, which since then has exploded. So I think we managed to identify a good genre to take interest in, and it's going to be interesting when we let you guys try and see how we married the two, because that's something we have spent a lot of time thinking about and discussing with the World of Darkness brand team.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a little bit more questions about that next. But first of all, I wanted to just say something. It was very interesting for me to notice now, especially now that the project is revealed, how long in the past this collaboration goes
Your audio
into.
cut out there, Martina. Could you
Oh,
repeat that?
of course. Yeah. So basically, I've noticed that because of the collaboration was going pretty long time ago, and some of our community members after the game reveal also noticed that there are actually some illustrations in the V5 core books and source books which are referring to your product. So how did that cooperation look like in the middle of development of V5?
Right. That was quite interesting and fun because a lot of times when you come in with a licensed product like we did in our case, you're kind of left in a position where you can't really add to that. You can only relate to what's already there. But as V5 was still being finalized, we had a chance and an opportunity to really integrate our game with the master game, if you will. So there's a bunch of concept art in the book that comes from our game, and we were also quite involved with the Second Inquisition and the stuff that's going on there. So it's like I told someone the other day, it's interesting to have a tabletop RPG you played when you were young, and now you get to add to it, but it was all a secret. It was all a masquerade. So you're not even credited. You can't even boast to your friends about it. But
Now you can. This is the
now I
very,
can. Exactly.
yes. It's the perfect moment to do that, and I'm very happy that we can finally share this with the world. So, speaking of the world, the game is being set in Prague. Can you tell us a little bit more about the choice and the decision behind why exactly this city?
Right. Yes, Prague is, I don't know, if you've never been to Prague, you might not know, but it's a very interesting merger of old Europe and new modern culture. It's very rich in old sites, castles, churches. You got the astronomical clock. There's just tons of history in Prague, but then there's also a very, very modern and new take to it. And to us, it felt like an environment that begged to be recreated in a video game that you can explore and you can travel through and you can fight in. Uh, and it seemed like a perfect fit for something like Vampire the Masquerade, since you have this dynamic of modern knights, but old history of the vampires.
So now going back to the gameplay in itself, Battle Royale is a genre which is very much engraved in a lot of people's mind as a genre which mechanics are not that much connected with the story or what's going on in the game. How did that merge look like in development of your game with Vampire the Masquerade as the setting?
Right. I think what's important to realize first and foremost is that it's just a genre like any other genre. It can become what you want it to become. Traditionally, the battle royale games have no story because there was no need for it and maybe no desire for it among the first people who engaged with it. But what battle royale essentially is, for those that don't know, it's kind of a last man standing scenario that starts in a very dynamic way, where you end up in the world, and you have to kind of work your way up in a power journey to get the tools, the gear, the weapons needed to finally be the last person standing. In our case, you're obviously the last vampire standing, and we are connecting this to the idea of protecting and maintaining the masquerade. And I know there's been a lot of people who's like, yeah, but fighting in the middle of a city, how can you maintain the masquerade? It's all about player choice, and there are consequences to everything you do. So you can play the game in many ways, but ultimately you will want to consider the basic tenets of the lore here, which is to not reveal too much about who you are and what you're doing. That has consequences.
I love that. And speaking of that, this seems to be a very much of a modern take and a new take on the genre. How did your past experience in AAA games and multiplayer games in particular affected the development of this game? Because it's not only about Martin, who is here in the call, but also other members of Sharkmob team have experience in the various segments of this industry, in various titles. So how did it all come together in development of this project?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have a team of quite senior developers, as well as juniors, of course. But there's like plenty of people here with 20 years experience or thereabouts. Especially when it comes to stuff like level design, game design, art. Pretty much all disciplines are well covered. And I think what we can really add is this what's typically called AAA production value, which is essentially attention to detail and a focus on uh, getting it not just to play right, but look right and work right. And Vampire the Masquerade is a very visual brand to me. It's a lot about expression and how you convey who you are or your identity. So, for example, we have customization options for your character that go beyond what I think most battle royale games do currently. And you can kind of like really create the type of character you want to play, for example. And that's a typical AAA thing where it's not needed for the game, but it's taking it that one step further.
Sure, and speaking of players' identity and trying to really play who you want, one of the very core aspects of Vampire the Masquerade is clans, of course. And when we always talk about the new products like video games, people are very, very interested in the clans which are going to be featured. What was your approach to clans in the Battle Royale game?
Right. We saw an opening in the clans to kind of in a natural way for this game create different play styles. In a multiplayer game, it's super important that you accommodate different play styles. It could be someone that wants to be a bit stealthy, or someone that wants to engage from a distance, or someone that wants to get up close and personal with a melee weapon. And the clans kind of lend themselves quite well to different play styles. So as you saw in the trailer, I guess you notice there's a Toreador, and there are other clans as well. At launch, we'll have a few, and then we'll keep on adding. It's a live game, so there's going to be a constant stream of content and updates along the way. And the clans simply offer a good range of gameplay diversity and fantasy, because there's an identity to the clans as well, which is quite important when you select and create characters, for example.
Sure, and I assume that different clans are going to also mean different playstyles. So, what kind of different playstyles are going to be available there for people to enjoy in the game?
Right. We have a quite dynamic take on that, where in the end, in especially for a battle royale, you kind of have to adapt your playstyle based on the weapons and the tools that you find as you play every session. So you have this basic idea going in of, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, but you might have to adapt to it. So it's a very fluid situation. But essentially, the clans do offer the basic fantasy. Like it's pretty easy to imagine, I guess, that a Bruja would be quite brutal and a warrior, a true fighter, up close, personal. And the Nosferatu might be a bit more stealthy and capable of deception in a way that other classes might not be, for example.
I see. And of course, we've seen a lot of the shooting in the teaser itself, but there are also melee weapons that the Toreador is carrying. Will melee fight will be also present in your game, as it is not that much popular in other Battle Royale games?
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely part of it. And it's a natural part of it, because I think everyone who played any Vampire the Masquerade game know that vampires they're not snipers in that sense. They're not, you know, that type of combat. They're very up close and personal. So it's a perfect fit for our IP. And I guess this is a perfect example of where genre marries the fantasy. You know, it's a good mix.
That's great. And of course, last week when I was sharing some of the general mechanics and concepts that are in your game, people were very interested about one in particular, and that is feeding. Do vampires in Battle Royale feed as well? Do they need to remember that they need blood?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a core part of the vampire fantasy. So that was one of the early things we identified as an important component to the game. You're the monster, you're the predator, the hunter, and finding that blood, finding the right blood, is a good important thing to remember when you play the game. There are benefits to taking your time to hunt, for sure.
That's great. And of course, let's go back to the game in general. And we've shared a little bit of information about your game when it comes to the business model last week. For example, that it's going to be free to play. But I want to ask you, in your words, what does Sharkmob stands on the business model, and how do you want to interact, your players to interact with the game?
Yeah, so the idea of making a free-to-play game started with, it's basically a battle royale game. So typically it's not necessarily the premium model type product, right? But we also thought that it's a good way to onboard people and get them to hopefully try the stuff we want to put out there. We're not super fond or big fans at all of monetizing gameplay in the sense that you can pay to win. That's not something we're interested in. We're not interested in monetizing loot boxes. We are much more fond of monetizing stuff like vanity, for example. So if you see something that's really cool that make you feel more special when you play, that's typically the type of thing we would look at monetizing and having as a business model.
That's great. And one of the other things that is important for a lot of people in the community who played Battle Royale games or played multiplayer games, and maybe they don't anymore, because some of the multiplayer games have the issue of the community being toxic. So I need to ask you a question, whether you have any plans of ensuring a non-toxic, accessible gaming environment for every player who wants to jump in from a TTRPG and play a Battle Royale.
Yeah, I mean, every time you're on the internet meeting other people, you definitely run the risk of coming across the type of people you don't want to socialize with. One of the founding principles and core principles of our studio is no assholes. Basically, we don't recruit assholes, and we don't want to play with assholes. And what that means is that our community team will put in a lot of effort to make sure players feel welcome and safe. And if you act like an idiot, we're going to show you the door. That's the basic policy.
This is a very similar policy that we want to have in the role playing. So I'm very happy that that you're showing this. And of course, what are your plans when it comes to the future of this game and Sharkmob in general? People are of course very much wondering on what are your plans of supporting this game in the future, and whether you can share anything about that with us.
Sure, absolutely. We are creating a live game and a battle royale game. And again, not everyone in the audience might be familiar, but what that means typically these days is that you have a seasonal loop of content that reoccurs every few weeks. You drop some new content, right? So this is our studio's first game. This is the game we set out to do. This is the game we started and built our studio on. This is, I can't emphasize enough how important this title is for us, and how eager we are to create that good, solid Vampire the Masquerade but battle royale type experience. It is super, super important for us to nail this live game. And so if we get our way, we're gonna run this for quite some time online and hopefully get a big following. That's what we hope, at least.
That's great. And I have to ask the last question, which a lot of us are very interested in. When we'll be able to play this game before the release? Are there going to be any chances for us to jump on board earlier?
Well, all of you guys looking at this are already our special friends, I guess, since you bothered to tune in. So we'll make sure you get a chance to play it one way or another, a beta or some test. Stay tuned, keep checking back here. We'll let you know when it's about time.
Cannot wait to join with the family and kick some asses in your game. Thank you so much, Martin, for joining us. Thank you so much for this information, and good luck in development.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.